Martin. I'm the Director of Lifelong Learning, and we're glad to sponsor this event today. I was trying to think when it actually started, Norm. Norm and we're in a small group together at church, and we're good friends. And I love to hear his stories about Pumpkinvine and how they had to work at developing this. And it wasn't an easy task. Many times they had many challenges. And that's what we'll get to hear from the original founders of the Pumpkinvine. So we're really looking forward to that. Norm was town manager at Shipshewana, and that was the last leg added to it, the Pumpkinvine. And so those stories in particular I got to hear, but there's many other stories as well along the way that they developed over time. So I'm going to introduce Norm, and he's going to pick it up from here, and we're looking forward to what they have to share.
Thank you, Linford. Can you hear me all right in the back? No? Turn it up. Now, can you hear me? All right. Thank you, Linford, and thank you all for coming and turning out. What is not spoken this morning, but it will be evident, is that how many people it takes to get a job done and the kind of team effort it took to get where we are today. It takes many talents. Not one person has enough talents to make this work. And so we're grateful to many people, and more than even the people that talk today, there are many people out there who had a part in making this happen. So we want to acknowledge that. I'll introduce John Yoder, who is a keeper of so many records, and he was chair of the board for many years. He took files and files over to the Elkhart County Museum, so if anybody wants to do research, you're welcome to, but it'll take you years to get it all read, I guarantee you. Some of us thought he was a little anal, but on the other hand, then we met Jim Smith, and John's nothing compared to the details of Jim Smith. He came to Shipshewana, and we were doing measurements, and he not only wanted to measure to the inch, but he wanted to measure every quarter inch. So I learned how to be detailed, but glad we had him. So John, it's up to you.
Yeah, I took 17 feet of files to the Elkhart County Museum when we started talking about doing a book on the Pumpkinvine. Anyway, it's great to see so many people here. I'm actually surprised. I didn't know there was that much interest in this old trail. Anyway, my name's John Yoder, and I was a Friends of the Pumpkinvine board member from '89 to 2019, board chair. And one of the things that I did was take a lot of pictures, wrote and edited the newsletter, wrote letters to the editor, gave talks to local groups, and did some negotiating of land purchases. What we're going to do today, each of us is going to talk a little bit about how we got interested in trails. My interest starting in 1988, what we did, what we didn't do, the trail overview, how it was built in stages. I'll give a little history on the Pumpkinvine Railroad, the origin of the trail idea from each of the presenters, Chet, CJ, Jim, finally Norm. I became aware of trails when my wife and I were living in Oak Brook, Illinois in the fall of 1988, while we were on sabbatical from Goshen College and AMBS. Oak Brook is about 3 miles from the Illinois Prairie Path, one of the first Rails to Trails projects in the country. What we saw on the Prairie Path were joggers, families, groups of kids on bikes, and I began riding on the Illinois Prairie Path with my 12-year-old daughter, Mandy. At some point on one of these rides, she asked me, why can't we do this in Goshen? The story, there she is. The story we are telling today emphasizes the role of the Friends of the Pumpkinvine and creation of the Nature Trail. But I want to emphasize that this project succeeded because it was a public-private partnership. Our role was to be the front end of the trail-making process. We did research on ownership, raised funds to purchase the corridor. We divided the project into phases, resolved ownership issues. We clear, fence, and gated the corridor. We assisted the public agencies in obtaining development funds, and then we donated the land to the local public agency, whether it's the town or the park department, to manage the trail. We did all these things in cooperation with the local public agencies. We didn't want to give them something they didn't want, so we engaged with them all the time through the whole process. What we didn't do is we didn't actually build the Pumpkinvine because that was what the managing agencies did, and we didn't own it. Now that's true up until the very end after I left the board. Then the board did buy and develop the very last section. That's from 20 to 35. Now I'd like to begin with just an overview of the trail's construction so that you can get a sense of how this all worked over time. That's a line showing the route. Then we had a little bit done in 99, a little more in 2005, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012. There's 11 two parts, 2012, 2013, 2019, 2022, finally, 2023. Now, let me just give you a little snapshot of the history of the original railroad. The railroad was organized in 1888 as the Canada and St. Louis Railroad Company. The plan was to build the line from Bay City, Michigan, and through Battle Creek and Sturgis to Goshen, Terre Haute, and eventually to St. Louis. Well, they had tremendous ambitions. It was eventually owned by the Penn Central. The line was abandoned in the 1980s. This is a picture of the route: Bay City, Battle Creek, Goshen. The part north of Battle Creek was abandoned very soon after it was started, but the other part continued. Well, after the railroad was abandoned, there was a group interested in an excursion between Middlebury and Shipshewana. So in 1991, they organized this. And I would call your attention to this little tidbit of information. The excursion left Middlebury at 11, arrived at Shipshewana at 12. That's 6 miles. So they were going 6 miles an hour. Obviously, the tracks were not in tremendous shape. The rails were finally removed in 1982. Now, this is significant because the National Rail Banking Act was not put in place until 1983. Rail banking means that technically the line is never abandoned, so that you can work with the railroad for the entire process. People frequently ask me where the name Pumpkinvine came from. Well, the name came from the railroad. As you can see, they called it the Pumpkinvine. Where did the railroad get the name? Nobody really knows. We think it may have been from the winding nature of the track, although when I look at it, it doesn't look all that winding. Anyway, what did the corridor look like in 1989 when we first got interested? Well, this is north of County Road 28, south of US 20. You can see the car going by on the road up there. Middlebury looking north across Spring Street, south of the Little Elkhart River, the bridge over Rock Run Creek, north of the bridge. Well, so this is what us five Mennonite guys, decided we really thought this might be a great idea. Norm Kaufman, myself, John Kolb, Chet Peachy, and Irvin Beck. Our interest in converting abandoned railroads into a multi-use trail came from the fact that 4 of us were cyclists and 1 was a local historian. We were so unsure of what we were doing, we didn't bother to take a picture of ourselves back in 1989. So this is from 30 years later. Although I can show you the minutes from the 1989 meeting. Now, let me just say a little bit about 2 of the people who are not here today. Irvin Beck was a board member from 89 to 92. He is the one who, throughout 1989, after we got back from sabbatical, constantly bugged me about why don't you do something about the Pumpkinvine. So he and I together, we walked on the trail May 28, 1989, to see what it was like. And this is what it was like. We started this picture was taken later, but the same thing. And I had a machete to hack my way through the multifloral rows. It was wall-to-wall multifloral rows. Terribly difficult to get through. But we thought, you know, the corridor's still here, we can clean this up. Irvin wrote a little short history of the Pumpkinvine that was used for the first grant that we did, Hometown, Indiana. And he is also the one who's responsible for insisting that nature be in the title of the trail. So we thank Irvin for his contributions. John Kolb. John Kolb passed away a year ago. He was one of the original board members as well. He was on from 89 to 92. He gained his interest in trails from his cycling experience in the Netherlands. And he was a spokesman for the board at some of our early public meetings. Here's a clipping from the Goshen News, May 18, 1990. You can see John standing on the left. He's speaking to the Elkhart County Park Board, encouraging them to apply for a grant. And the grant said, in a 20-minute presentation, John Kolb explained to the group that the planners would like to secure the right-of-way for a nature trail and bicycle path. So he was just extremely important in doing that. And while we're on this particular meeting, I might mention as well, the opposition showed up to tell us we can't do this. It divides the farm fields. There's litter, noise, and vandalism now. It can't be patrolled, and there's deeds to the railroad were all easements, so nothing. The railroad has nothing to sell. So we thank John and Irvin for their contributions. Now, what was the context for us as we began this trail? Well, fortunately, we discovered after our first meeting, that the Elkhart County Park Department already had this trail in their master plan. And one of the things that they said in that plan was the opportunity exists by linking the abandoned Pumpkinvine Railroad connecting Goshen and Middlebury with the Little Elkhart River to Bonneville Mill and the St. Joe River to form an extended corridor of great natural variety and beauty. We knew nothing about this master plan, but there it was. We stepped in and helped them do implement their own master plan. The other thing we didn't know was that Goshen Parks had put this in their master plan of 1987. And there you can see how this fits in the current situation. Both of these plans became the foundation for the public-private partnership that was one of the critical factors in making the trail a reality. People often talk about what great vision we had as founders. The truth is, there was a lot of this going on. The National Rails to Trails Conservancy published this article, 1990, that shows that there were 242 trails in the country with 3,100 miles. So this wasn't a new idea, except in Indiana. If you can, as you can see on this map, there was all kinds of trails: Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, but nothing in Indiana. So we had a challenge because there was nothing here, but around us there was a lot going on. National Geographic in 1990 published a large article, Greenways, Paths to the Future. And then there was this book by Charles Little that really inspired me. This is a quote that I really resonated with. He talked about the ugliness of America. That was one of the things he felt was that the Greenways could overcome. And his response to this ugliness was a growing movement. He saw Greenways as a growing movement in creating land conservation, creative land conservation, that is really quite novel. It is to develop an entire new infrastructure category, no less, a system of greenways down rivers and streams, across ridgeways, over abandoned railroad beds, along scenic and historic routes, which in terms of any quality of life measure worth considering, may be one of the most significant people-oriented efforts in civic improvement to be mounted in the post-war era. That's a pretty strong endorsement of greenways, and I really thought, well, we're onto something. If this is what greenways are, we're really onto something. And then there was also the National Rails to Trails Conservancy doing national conferences. This is one I went to in Baltimore in 1991. And I really, when I opened the program, I saw, come meet your railroad. I thought, okay. We had correspondence with Penn Central, but we'd never been able to talk to them. So I rushed over to this workshop, and there was the Penn Central real estate executive, Mike Cloud. This is a picture from later on, but this is the guy that I talked to. I invited him to come to, I asked him, were you interested in selling? He said, sure, we'll sell it. I invited him to come to Elkhart County. John Kolb and I took him in a car. We rode all over the county and looked down the trail from the crossroads. And he said, oh, this will be a great trail. I don't think he cared a thing about the trail, but he was interested in selling it. So we developed a good relationship with him. But that's all the positive. Now let me talk a little bit about the negative. There was opposition to the trail, as you saw in the earlier quote. There were petitions against us. There were claims the corridor was destroyed. There was misinformation. There were letters to the editor. This is all before we had the closing on the trail. I'll talk about some afterwards as well. At the county commissioners meeting, April 1992, we were applying for a grant, and Mike Yoder brought petitions with 1,000 signatures. He had 853 from property owners in Elkhart County. A Middlebury resident presented 127 names, and LaGrange County had 184, so over 1,000. And too much of the trail was destroyed, they said, and the adjacent landowners owned the corridor. This was, again, the idea that everything reverted to the railroad after the trail was abandoned. The Elkhart County Commissioners voted 3-0 not to support an application. Then we had multiple letters to the editor. Over there on the table, I have 4 books of news clippings, if you're interested in looking. And a lot of them are letters to the editor. I picked out one. These funds could be used for more urgent things. Where's the money going to come from? The farmers are already using the land, and there's liability if somebody from the trail jumps the fence, then the farmer is liable. And we're not allowed to hunt anymore because of the trail. There's more. Cars will be parked along county roads, causing problems. And they can't be patrolled. How can we get them to patrol this when we can't get the county police to come and respond to shooting the geese on our land? Good question. Questioning the Penn Central's right to sell the land was a major theme of the letters. Opponents said that when Penn Central stopped the railroad service, the land reverted to the landowners because the original railroad got the land as an easement, not fee simple. And since Penn Central would only offer the Friends a quitclaim deed for the land, it didn't guarantee that they owned anything. That's true. That's why we had Jim Ingold do a title search. That was true. But it was also the reason that Jim and the LaGrange title looked at the original conveyance to the railroad, and we were sure that Penn Central owned majority of the corridor. We had no intention of asking people for money without knowing that we owned the land. We were pretty sure we did. So that was our thinking. We attempted to have discussions with Penn Central, but for the most, not with Penn Central, with the adjacent landowners who were opposed to this. Mike Yoder said such a meeting still didn't make any sense because most of the landowners involved didn't think there was anything to discuss. One of the other reasons it was mentioned was that the Amish opposed the trail. This is a quote from one of the letters. I've been able to determine no support in the Amish community for the trail, said Mike Yoder. Well, despite the opposition, we were able to raise the money to purchase Pumpkinvine and had the closing on December the 22nd, 1989. In attendance, Pat Holcomb, Mike Puro, myself, Mike Cloud, Elkhart Mayor James Perrin, and Rich Fay, Director of Goshen Parks. Soon after that, we sued 17 people, the first section of the trail from State Road 4 to County Road 28, to prove that we own the land. Why did we have to sue? Well, as long as there's a cloud on your title, you're never going to get anybody to give you any money. So there was no choice. That's what we did. And 6 months later, Judge Worth Yoder ruled the Friends own the disputed corridor. So the loss in the court put the lie to the notion that the Pumpkinvine corridor reverted to adjacent landowners. So opposition turned to anti-trail bills in the legislature, attempts at intimidation and blocking access to the corridor, and combining the Friends legal case with the class action case. Now, my records on the legislation are a little hazy, so take this all with a grain of salt. What I could come up with was House Bill 1727, House Bill 1090, House Bill 1071, and Senate Bill 207. I don't know if these were the same bills, different bills, bills combined. The point is that these bills were all designed to stop legislation, to stop the trail. I wrote this as a comment on Bill 1727. The purpose of this bill is to bankrupt trail managers by making development excessively expensive, make it more difficult to raise the funds necessary to meet the bill's new standards, permit a minority opposed to the trail to tie its development up in endless public referenda, and exhaust the trail's promoters through reams of endless paperwork. That's basically what the bills were about. We had enough sense. We had our state senator, Marv Reedsecker, write to the Attorney General and ask her, do these bills apply to us? And the Attorney General wrote back and basically said, since you didn't get money through these bills, then they don't apply to you. Good enough for us. No problem. Back in after we owned the trail, but before the courts ruled, we had trail walks to highlight the trail, and the opposition tried through various means to show their unhappiness and intimidate us. Cars were parked, fences were built, logs were erected. There's me climbing over the fence and my wife trespassing. And the most infamous time was the shooting at the pumpkins, November 11, 1994. I don't know if you can see it, but there along in the background, you can see those yellow, orange pumpkins. These were adjacent landowners shooting at the pumpkins as we walked down the trail. The idea being, showing your unhappiness. Well, that was pretty creative, actually. But we weren't intimidated. And the final one I want to mention in the intimidation or opposition was the house built on County Road 35. It was built right on top of the corridor. And I know this was built to stop the trail because the guy who built the house told me so. He learned it from the guy who owned it. So I'm pretty sure this is true. This is the aerial view of the same thing. One final point. Our second major lawsuit was in July of 1995 on the right-of-way between US 20 and 850 West in LaGrange County. About a month after that, Farm Bureau managed to get our lawsuit combined with a class action lawsuit for the whole state of Indiana against Penn Central. The significance of this was that it made the class action huge. We're talking about all Penn Central corridors in Indiana. And it wasn't resolved for 5 years. It took 5 years to resolve this because of that action. This is a table showing all the lawsuits, just to give you an idea of what we were involved in the front end of creating the trail. So how do you maintain interest in the trail when it's tied up in court for 5 years? Well, you have trail walks. We had a $10,000 grant to build a short demo section, and we had our newsletter. This is an example of a trail walk of 95, trail walk of 96. Then our $10,000 grant, we cleared beginning section at County Road 20, at State Road 4, and built 150 feet of trail. Then we published a newsletter. Here's one that says Middlebury gets a railroad. Another one, a legal update. Another one, report of a conference we went to. Finally, report of a trip to the Cardinal Greenway. So we had whatever came along, we put in the newsletter to maintain interest. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Chad.
Well, a lot of things happened, and I may be a little redundant on some of these things, but they bear repeating because of what happened. Okay, my role, I was on the board from okay, thanks. I was on the board, as you can see. I have a gap years that I'll talk about a bit later. But I was board secretary. I offered my cycling experience. I managed the Friends merchandise, and I helped to design the first Pumpkinvine jersey. There's one right back here. That was, and I sold merchandise at the Pumpkinvine bike rides. Again, you saw a picture of the board composition. We had 3 people with PhDs, 2 in English, 1 in education, 1 BA in social work, 1 master's in psychiatric nursing. What could possibly go wrong? We did have research abilities and enough humility to ask for help when we needed it. So there we are. This is Galen Kaufman. We knew that we needed some additional expertise legally, so we invited Galen to join our board, and he was gracious enough to do a lot of work for us. I should also mention that my interest in the trails began in 1988. Actually, I was on the same trip that John and Judy Kolb were on in the Netherlands in the spring, I think spring and summer of 1988. And we found the trails there just to be delightful and safe, and that was the thing that got us interested in being involved in the trails. So, back to looking at what happened then we had Galen, who joined our board and gave us legal advice, and he was extremely helpful in doing what we needed to do. He negotiated our option to purchase agreement from Penn Central, and the second point is important to look at. Penn Central Corporation shall not sell, contract to sell, or offer the real estate to any other during the option period. This was important for us so that we could have some protection for what we owned. And here is the information that I just referred to. To secure the option, we needed to raise $15,000 down payment. Since the Friends organization had no money, 5 board members each agreed to borrow $3,000 to make the $15,000 down payment. I'm not sure how many of us told our spouses we were doing this, but we did. And we were able to secure the option. One of the, here is an indication of what the option, and Danny Graber was also a person that helped us raise some money. We needed money. The interesting thing was, even though we had nothing to show for it, people were still contributing. So Danny Graber was a person who helped us raise money and awareness. he was the chair of our bike ride committee and did raise quite a bit of money for us over the 14 years. We wanted to be sure that before we did a bike ride, we had somebody who knew about organizing bike rides and leading bike rides, and Danny was that person. Here's some more information about Danny and the work that he did. I think we indicated that he raised about $100,000 for us through the bike rides. So bike rides do raise money for us, as long as we can get people out to them. We had the registrations that started in, the first one was, we had 225 people. We thought that was great. But the most we had was 1,313 in 2012, and that we thought that was even better. That was important to us. Here's a graph of what the rides look like, and much of the success of the rides had to do with the publication. We publicized that information throughout the state on bicycling organizations, Bicycling Magazine, those types of things. I was involved in several attempts to engage with the opposition. One was I met with Representative Phil Warner. John said he doesn't remember this, but it's true. He gave me a notebook of information that I was to deliver to Representative Warner, which I did. He graciously accepted it, and that was about it. I didn't stay very long at his home. And then I met with Mike Yoder, head of Farm Bureau. In fact, one of the meetings we had very early, we invited Mike to the meeting, and he did come to our meeting, and didn't offer much in terms of comment, except not sure that this project would really work. We met with some of the adjacent landowners at A&R Machine Shop. These were mostly Amish, and sure enough, one of the opposition leaders showed up at the meeting also. This is where I then need to talk about that bit of gap in my time on the board. At the point where I was involved with the board, person who was in charge of, well, a big opponent to the Pumpkinvine Trail happened to be chair of the board of directors where I worked. And there was considerable discussion with my supervisor about my involvement there, and continued to give a difficult relationship in an organization. So I told my boss that I would resign from the board. That doesn't mean I stopped working for the Pumpkinvine, but I wasn't on the board, which I did, and then rejoined the board again in 2009. So that's a little bit of a story of what happened to me. Another way we engaged with supporters was to promise them that if they gave $500 toward the purchase, we'd put their names on a plaque that's at Abshire Park. So every name that you see there is a result of somebody who was who gave $500 to maintain and give us some cash actually for the Pumpkinvine. We attempted to maintain visibility by selling all kinds of merchandise. In fact, these bags were probably the best thing that ever happened. We're still using ours, and it's now been, I don't know, 30-some years, and it's still working up really well. And I think Jim Smith was the person that helped to get these going. So we wanted to maintain visibility with a number of ways: pens, tote bags, license plates, magnets, caps. This is one of the most popular things that we had, was the Pumpkinvine hats. The original one was the dark one on the right side, and the two-toned one was a little later that somebody on the board told me would never sell, but it was the most popular one that sold. So that was, and some of those are still, you can see them around town every once in a while. This is the jersey that we designed, which somebody is wearing today. I'm not sure how many of these we sold. There was some question, should we do this? Is it too early to do it? That type of thing. But we went ahead and did it and found that it did sell very well. There is a second version now of the jersey out with the completion of the trail. This selling the merchandise at the Pumpkinvine bike rides was always a kind of an exciting thing for me to do. Another person that's critical to the construction of the Pumpkinvine was Larry Neff, who's director of the county parks. Larry was a board member for several years. He was the board vice president, at the same time being director of the Elkhart County Parks. This was really thought this was a good idea to have somebody from the parks on the board. And he managed construction of 40% of the Pumpkinvine Nature Trail. He wrote and submitted some grants. He navigated through wetlands. Wetlands was a big issue that we had to get through to make sure that we weren't disturbing too much of nature. And he had the US 20 tunnel shovel ready to go in 2009, and we got close to $1 million of money from the Obama stimulus. So when I returned to the board in 2009, I was part of the team that tried to create a route for the trail that would work for the farmers who had fields on both sides of the trail. There was this one section from County Road 20 to County Road 35 that we needed to finish. I think our negotiating team, which usually consisted of John and Bob Carrico, Bob is back here, we walked through those fields, we walked with the farmers, and everything we would suggest was, well, my horses won't go through a tunnel, my horses won't go over a bridge, so it was kind of like, we don't like that idea. And we wanted to stay on the main section of the trail. So we wanted to be sure that we could accommodate what it was that the farmers, the Amish farmers wanted. So this is the corridor between County Road 20 and County Road 35. Here are some of the options that were offered. If you know, the blue line was the way that you had to go, or that was around the road. There was one that was offered, number 4, that actually went through some wetlands, and that just didn't seem like it was going to work. There was another one that went around the wooded area and then came back on the trail. It was preferable that we could stay on as much of the corridor as possible. So this number 6 is the current way that the path now runs, and it was part of what I suggested, a way that we could deal with both the farmers and the wetlands and stay on the corridor as much as possible. The interesting thing with the farmer, you'll notice now, those of you who have ridden the trail, there's a big chicken house built there now. His big concern was his horses. He wanted to raise horses, and he needed the field. He now has a building of chickens there instead of horses. So, okay, I just want to also say that I want to give credit to Bob Carrico. Bob is here. Bob, would you stand up, please? Bob, some of you probably have really seen Bob's work and weren't aware of that, what was going on. But Bob, I want to personally give him some recognition for his tireless maintenance effort on the trail, sealing those cracks. It is irritating to ride cracks on a trail. Initially, he provided the T-shirts for bike rides before I was involved in that. And he got information distributed to the various organizations in the state that would then make it available, make the information available to bike riders. And he has, Bob, he has also done trail counting. Bob, how many people used the trail in 2024? You want to?
Yeah, MACOG approached the Pumpkinvine Advisory Committee and
I got it.
approached the Pumpkinvine Advisory Committee in 2019 and said that they wanted to put about 10 trail usage counters on trails in their jurisdiction. And so they were going to have 3 of those on the Pumpkinvine. And so by a year later, they had delivered trail counters to Elkhart County Parks, Goshen Parks, and Middlebury Parks. And I thought that tourism is so important over at Shipshewana, and that it would be really beneficial to have a counter there. So I raised money for one, and then MACOG agreed to take the license for it and be responsible for maintaining it. So we've had the counters, one was the Goshen Parks decided to put theirs on the Mill Race Trail, and Elkhart County Parks has one about 2 miles east of Goshen, and the Middlebury one is at the north end of the big bridge over Rock Run Creek. And then the one that we had for Shipshewana is just west of County Road 850. And so the counts, well, these counters work by, there's a induction coil embedded in the asphalt, and then there's also infrared detector, and so as a person goes by, the infrared detector detects the heat from their body, and if there's no signal from the induction coil, well, then that counts as a pedestrian. But with bicyclists, the steel in the bike causes the induction coil to record a signal. So if there's both, well, then it's a bicyclist. So the Mill Race Trail has been having 80 to 100,000 passes each year, and a pass, that's the number of people who would go past it, but most people go in both directions. They go out and then they come back. So to translate that to the number of people, the number of passes, the number of people, you really need to divide the numbers by 2. So the number of passes, for instance, in the Mill Race Trail has been running about 80 to 100,000 a year, so somewhere around 40 or 50,000 people use that trail each year. The Middlebury Trail runs about 95,000. Last year it was 110,000. And Shipshewana is about the same as Middlebury, somewhere around 100,000. Last year it was 116,000. The bicyclist to pedestrian ratio for instance, Middlebury is about 70% bicyclists and 30% pedestrians. So in all instances except the Mill Race Trail has substantially more pedestrians than bicyclists because a lot of people like to walk and jog there. So I would say the trail has had a pretty heavy use. It depends on your expectations, I suppose.
Oh, thank you, Bob. Bob has done tremendous amount of work, and he has saved the county park department a lot of money with his volunteers that he has out there. Also, if you enjoy the flowers on the trail, not just the natural ones, but the ones that may have been seeded, thank Bob. He's the one that did that. Also, in closing, I'm not too happy with the term Mount Pumpkin. It doesn't mean anything to me. I'm suggesting, and I have written to several people, it should be renamed Mount Carico. So I hope that happens. My years of working on the Pumpkinvine were enjoyable because it was a group effort. That was important to me. CJ.
Good morning. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, I was doing a considerable amount of bicycling, mostly on the county roads, which isn't the safest place to ride. So when I saw there was an informational meeting being held at the Goshen Public Library, as I remember, I went to that informational meeting that had to do with the possibility of the Pumpkinvine Trail. And that's how I became involved with the Friends of the Pumpkinvine. And I was on that board for a period of 10 years. And I was given the job of being treasurer to an organization that had no money. So it wasn't a big burden, that's for sure. But we had our challenges in raising funds to see this thing happen. And I'm not used to this fancy stuff here, so. Okay, and we'll have I think there's going to be a video of that little airplane ride we took. At the time of, or this period of time, I was working for Lake City Bank here in Goshen, and we were able to get a loan from the bank to complete some of our acquisitions.
This was our attempt to show people that the trail is actually still there. The world is still there. Yeah, so we organized this flyover because people said, well, the trail has been destroyed. There's nothing there anymore. So we thought, well, we better check this out. And went all the way. This is just a little clip of the trail, of the trip. Here you get to US 20, and at the end, the plane turns back toward Goshen, and you can see the trail the whole way. There you go.
That ride was more fun for me than it was for John. I think we've seen this picture before, close to. That's at the closing of the purchase. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Jim Ingold is in this photo, and Jim is here with us this morning. Jim, I'd like to have you stand if you would, please. And I have to tell you a story about Jim. Jim and I grew up in the same church for many years, and knowing him for probably 60 years of my life. And he's a fine Christian man, and at the time, he was the owner of Cripe Title here in Goshen. And before we made the purchase, Jim agreed to do research on all the deeds. And it was through his work letting us know that at least 85% of those deeds were good deeds, that Penn Central had a right to sell those deeds to any buyer. And Jim did that without any cost to Friends of the Pumpkinvine. And so it's people like Jim Ingold that made this trail happen. Without his expertise, without his generosity in doing it at no cost, allowed us to make this purchase. And so Jim is one of the people that I have tons of respect for. And he did a great service to Friends of the Pumpkinvine, and I thank you. Naturally, we did have some income from our friends. Friends of the Pumpkinvine during this time. We had an annual membership fee. And so we did have a little money. Another gentleman that I want to personally recognize is Jim Brotherson. He's the gentleman in the middle here. One of the, John and myself, and there were several others that were doing talks to different civic groups that were wanting information about the Pumpkinvine. And I was invited to go to the Elkhart Rotary Club to make a presentation on the possibilities of this trail. And after the meeting, Mr. Brotherson came up to me. He handed me a check for $2,000. And he said, I want to represent you people as your legal counsel at no charge. And I about fell over. But anyway, I let John know, and it was shortly after I think John met with Mr. Brotherson, and he agreed to give us the legal counsel that we needed on a pro bono basis. He also enlisted the help of a couple of his associates, Jim Byron and Doug Mulvaney. And for years and years, they supplied us legal service at no charge. And again, without people like that, people like Jim Ingold, this trail may never have happened because we had no other funding. We couldn't get grants that we needed. So it's people like Jim Brotherson, Jim Ingold that made this whole thing possible. The other person I'd like to recognize and thank, of course not here today, but her name was Danae Wright, and she was a expert on reading a deed and determining what kind of validity or what standing that deed had. She appeared on our behalf at that lawsuit that was held down in Lebanon, Indiana. And it was that class action lawsuit involving trails. And it was her testimony, expert testimony. I mean, she could dissect a deed, not just word by word, but letter by letter. She could tell you the meaning of those deeds, because it's not as simple as just reading it the way you and I might read it and say it's a good deed or a bad deed. But she knew her stuff and did us a tremendous amount of good in that lawsuit. Unfortunately, Mr. Brotherson passed away several years ago due to cancer, but he also was very involved in the new gardens that were built over in Elkhart. He was also one of the leaders in that effort. So he was a very civic-minded person. And I'm assuming that's Danae, right? Yeah. This is a picture of the trailhead at Lincoln Avenue. That's the way it looked when we made the purchase. We cut down all those trees. That's yours truly on the bulldozer. And if I remember right, Mel Cross dug out the stumps of those trees that we cut. And so he had a big contribution as well. Bob Carrico at work. He was working all the time. He was always out there. A lot of those flowers are the things that Bob Carrico did on his own. Lowell Miller. I don't know if many of you may know Lowell. He was from Middlebury. He was the town marshal for quite a few years, and also became town manager. The important thing is that he served on our Pumpkinvine board for a number of years, and to become the town manager at Middlebury was of utmost importance to getting the trail through Middlebury, because there was a lot of opposition to the trail in Middlebury, in the town itself. But through the efforts of Lowell Miller and Mark Salee, who was on their park board, made it happen. The other important, I'd like to say this was a strategic move that we made in getting our board members onto the town manager position, but I don't think that was in our long-range plan at all. But that's the way it happened, and it was one of the most beneficial things that we were able to do, and certainly helped our efforts in it making our trail a reality. We closed on this Pumpkinvine Trail in December of 1993. And I remember Jim Brotherson distinctly saying after that we closed on the deal is to don't be afraid to assert your ownership. Well, to me, that gave me the green light to enjoy some time on the trail. And on January the 1st of 1994, this is a personal story, so it may not be of interest to you, but January the 1st, a cold winter day, I drove my tractor, had a big John Deere 3010 diesel tractor, and I put my blade onto the back of the tractor and drove down to County Road 28 to, I was going to go out on the trail and see if I couldn't clear some of the brush of the briars and everything that was growing up. And when I got down to 28, the neighbors had dug probably a 20-foot by 20-foot pond, about 3.5 feet deep. And naturally it was frozen over, and I thought, well, maybe it was froze thick enough I could drive my tractor out there and get through. Well, as it turned out, as soon as I hit that ice, why the front end of the tires of my tractor disappeared under the water. And so I wasn't sure how deep it was going to be, but figured I'd give it a try, see if I could get through. But I was going back and forth, trying to get through this water hole. And probably within 2 minutes that I was there, 2 young guys in their early 20s showed up, standing right next to the trail, about 15 feet from where I was, both with rifles in hand. I was scared to death, and they were yelling and screaming, and I wasn't sure how to react, but I decided I'm just totally going to ignore them, which I did. And I kept working and eventually got through that water hole. And I turned the tractor around, and I actually backed from there all the way down, or almost down to Lincoln Avenue, pushing aside debris, and because there were down trees and all kinds of stuff they had put on the trail to try to block us. So anyway, I backed all the way down to County Road, or within 100 yards or so of County Road, or Lincoln Avenue. I think John had a picture of the barrier that the neighbors had erected about 100 to 150 yards north of State Road 4, and with fencing and all kinds of stuff. So I could have easily pushed it over and gotten through, but decided I wasn't going to do that. I think the neighbors were already upset enough without doing that. So anyway, I drove back up to County Road 28, was going to head back to the farm, and I could not get through that water hole. And I wasn't sure what to do because I didn't want to leave my tractor there and not knowing what might happen to it. But at the time, we were living downtown on 6th Street, and but I also had a farm up close to, up on County Road 28. But anyway, I drove back down to the barrier down towards Lincoln Avenue, and I took everything off the tractor I could carry with me, my log chain and my saw. I had a chainsaw with me, and I had a couple other items that I carried back to my home. Back then, the early 90s, I didn't have a cell phone, so I couldn't call my wife to come pick me up. But anyway, I walked all the way back to 6th Street with my stuff. And so the next morning, I called a friend of mine over at Millersburg, one of the Miller boys. They were in the excavation business, and asked him if they would go up there to County Road 28 the next day and take their backhoe and fill in that water hole, which they did, and gave us easy access to the trail. So I think that's about what I wanted to share today, and I guess at this point I'll give it back to John. Or excuse me, to Jim Smith.
can either use a laser pointer or this. How do you, which is forward? The right hand one? The pumpkin vine where the riding is easy. Pump those legs, keep your heart at its prime. The trail is smooth and beckons you onward. And believe it or not, there's just one hill to climb. Good morning. Welcome to the first public recitation of the one and only verse to the Ode of the Pumpkinvine. I hope it resonated with you. Yep, for you skeptics, just one hill to climb. For me to call an elevation on the Pumpkinvine a hill, the grade had to exceed 2%, as measured by my Garmin. The grade does get to 2% several times, particularly going past Middlebury. I suspect that many of you know that the grade at Mount Pumpkin measures 5% when you ride east to west up that hill. So let me repeat, the Pumpkinvine, where the riding is easy, there is just one hill to climb. There's the picture of my better side. I thought I'd use that one first. I know there are other guys with the same name as me here in Goshen, but I think that I am the only one associated with the Pumpkinvine. But sometimes I'm not so sure. I remember when I was tasked with presenting to the Elkhart County Commissioners at one of their regular meetings on some aspect of the Pumpkinvine. I was sitting in the back of the room, daydreaming, and thinking about my presentation coming up. Shortly, the president advised it was time to start and asked for everyone's attention. Then he got my attention by loudly and confidently announcing that we would now be led in prayer by, you guessed it, Jim Smith. My reaction was instantaneous. What? Wait just a second. How rude. He doesn't know me from Adam. He didn't ask if this would be okay. Besides, I had only a few seconds to respond. So I quickly resigned myself to my new assignment and decided to rise and give it my best shot. But before I could get to my feet, someone in front of me ably took over my assignment and rescued me with their opening prayer. I was now convinced that I am the only Jim Smith associated with the Pumpkinvine board, but not the only Jim Smith in Goshen. One of my favorite historians is Stephen Ambrose, the author of over 20 books. Perhaps my favorite is Undaunted Courage, the story of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Near the end of Ambrose's career and life, he wrote the history of the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, the title of which you see on the screen. The title got my attention. Nothing like it in the world. The men who built the Transcontinental Railroad 1863 to 1869. How this nearly 2,000 miles of railroad track, tunnels, and trestles was built in 6 years boggles the mind. I rode the Pumpkinvine this past Friday, the first time since the final 3 sections were completed. The day was bright and sunny, warm enough for shorts, but cool enough to require 2 layers on my chest, with a wind from the west most of the way. Just to be clear, that's a headwind. I couldn't help but wonder about using Ambrose's title for our project. Well, hang on. Let me try another approach. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. I couldn't help but wonder about using Ambrose's title for our project, The Pumpkinvine, nothing like it in the world, the men and women who built the Pumpkinvine Nature Trail, 1989 to 1923, to 2023. Okay, I agree that the title might be a bit hyperbolic for the Pumpkinvine. However, the trail is magnificent, reflecting the tenacity, determination, skill, and generosity of those who helped to make this project happen. It is a valued amenity for us locals to enjoy and be proud of. It is a magnet for those visiting our area. Without question, the 10 years I spent on this project were the most satisfying of my 43-year career. Literally a full-time job, sans paycheck, with this finished product being the ultimate reward, and darn well worth it. A little bit of background. I grew up in a small town in Muskegon County, Michigan, named Montague, on a dirt road, which didn't play well with my 24-inch bicycle, 1 mile from the big lake. My education was in the sciences, finished up with an MBA. My work history involved 3 years in the U.S. Air Force, Miles Laboratories in Elkhart, many of you, I think. There we go. Many of you remember Alka-Seltzer or Miles Laboratories, the makers of Alka-Seltzer and One-A-Day brand vitamins. It was a loss that they had to leave the area. We lived in New Jersey for 4 years. I discovered that it is hilly in northern New Jersey. For exercise, we bought hybrid bikes and rode them around our local town there. One afternoon, I found myself on a public road going downhill at 35 miles an hour. A car pulled up alongside me. The driver lowered his window and shouted, 35! I knew he meant 35 miles an hour. At the time, I thought it a bit crazy to be riding beside a car at 35 on a public road, but I had few choices. In the mid-1990s, I learned that a rail trail project had been completed in my hometown. A 22-mile paved trail starting in the town of Montague, just 5 miles from where I grew up. After trying that trail out, I was convinced that off-road trails were the way to go with biking. In 2001, I learned of the Pumpkinvine annual meeting on 22 April through the Goshen News, and I decided to attend. I found at the meeting there was about 50 of us there. John was leading. I liked what I saw and heard. In my mind, the Pumpkinvine Nature Trail project was a BHAG. BHAG was a name given to projects that when you see it, you automatically know it's right. You don't have to be convinced, and I thought that's what we had, that's what they had with the Pumpkinvine Nature Trail, and I wanted to be part. I learned that the court had quieted title on 8 miles of corridor, Middlebury to Shipshe, and also learned that that 8 miles then was ready for development. It had strong local support with over 200 members. I learned that the board was a working board, which I liked. So I joined the Pumpkinvine as a member in 2001. I also thought that the annual meeting could be expanded. I proposed that we, instead of just a meeting, that we do a dinner meeting. I thought that we could increase the attendance by 3 to 4 times. I made that proposal to John. He suggested I make it to the board. I did, and true to human nature, no good deed goes unpunished. They said, yes, we like that idea if you will do it. So I agreed. The location was the new Blue Gate restaurant in Shipshe. We were the first group to use their basement conference room in their main building. The date of that first dinner meeting was the 30th of April, 2002. And true to our expectations, as you can see, in 2001, when I was introduced to the Pumpkinvine, we had 50. John had been holding these meetings, I think, for the 10 years prior to this, so it's not that that was the first annual meeting. But once we started having dinner meetings, the attendance jumped by 3 times, got up to 6 times there in 2006. And it's been ongoing. The latest one, many of you may have been at, was held in Elkhart on 2025. So it continues to be a valuable part of the Pumpkinvine activity. Here's a picture of our meeting in 2005 with John delivering his president's address at the Essen House and Conference Center. One of the things having these annual dinner meetings required us to do is figure out how we could present a 17-mile trail in a format that people could understand and that we could carry around. So we came up with this 10-foot poster that Chuck Lehman in Mishawaka helped us with using a satellite image, and he printed it out for us, and then we could put information about each of the phases on the printout. We also learned how to use that printout in a bulletin or a brochure. That brochure is 30 inches long. Dee Berkey helped us with that. That proved to be very popular and a very good way to show what was going on with the trail. You'll know that I mentioned earlier that the court quieted title on the phase from US 20 out to County Road 850. And I didn't know what development, ready for development meant, because when we started looking at what was going on there, there were a lot of things that needed to be done. Where's the laser button? Got it. So over time, we discovered that there was little we could do with many of these parcels until we had quieted title beyond what the courts had already done for us. For example, and I'm going to start here, this will not go chronologically, but it will go simply west to east to make it simpler. We had blockages, we had gaps, we had an easement request, which we liked, and then we had encroachments. All of these needed to be dealt with before we could really do much with this whole area. So starting on the blockage, well, first of all, I wanted to review what development activities did the board have to undertake in order to get them ready for building a trail on a corridor. Well, these in red essentially all had to be eliminated, otherwise we would have trouble getting funding and having a local public agency want to take it over. We also did these things over here: clearing, fencing, appraising, surveying, just to get things ready for development also. As you can see, here's Mr. Carrico again. He was everywhere, continually working on this project. There's some wannabes on fencing equipment. Actually, they didn't want to be. They found this equipment and thought it made for a good picture. The ultimate goal, though, is to help these local public agencies, which are City of Goshen, Elkhart County, Middlebury and Shipshewana, to obtain construction funds and then donate the corridor to them so that the trail can be built on the corridor. We made many trips to the title company to receive a land donation, to purchase land, to grant an easement, to swap land, to sell land, to donate land. There was a lot of stuff going on. Now, like CJ mentioned, they took a trip by aircraft, by an airplane. I needed to get up in the air so I could take pictures of the various projects. So we used a helicopter. That was the first time in one of those, even though I spent 3 years in the Air Force. Just as a reminder, the railroad corridor is the piece of land that the railroad used to run on, and that we would build a trail on. Sometimes people get confused between the corridor and the trail. They are separate. So this was the corridor. It runs from 16 feet to 100 feet wide, 17 miles long approximately. It has a lot more area in it than you might think, 148 acres at least, and the average width is 72 feet. And the goal is to build a trail on that corridor for hiking and biking. When I first joined the board, I became aware that we had not been used to planning the features of a trail. We had the demonstration trail coming out of Abshire Park, but that was the only thing done when I joined the board. So we took some time to decide some standards. We debated, should we continue with crushed asphalt or should we go with asphalt? And shoot, now it's going the wrong way. I apologize for this. Oh, here we go. We decided on asphalt because asphalt, among other things, has an aha factor that you cannot get with crushed limestone. So we decided on asphalt. We decided on a trail width of 10 feet. The other width was 8 feet. We said that's too narrow. We went with 10 feet. Now we sometimes wish we had gone 12 feet. Trail route, initially we said it has to be on the corridor. We finally decided that to make it happen and to make it more interesting, let's go off the corridor where we have to in order to make a farmer, make it work better with a farmer. And I think it has made for a better trail. Trestles, preserve them if possible, 6 survive. Trail at US 20, pass under US 20. Fencing, pay our fair share. And professionals, can begin to pay for professional services. One of the things that I noticed quickly was that at times I would ask, why isn't such and such moving along? And this would have been in 2002 and beyond, and the answer was, so-and-so is working on it, they're doing it pro bono. And I said, if that's slowing it down, we can't do that anymore. So let's begin, as we can, to pay for professional services. Operating principles, how did we want to operate in the community? We said, first of all, we want to be a good neighbor. We want to consider all reasonable suggestions to make the trail possible, but we will not go away. We had been advised, and I think CJ mentioned this, that until the courts quieted title, we should stay off the corridor. But once quieted, we should get moving and stay moving. Make steady progress toward a worthy goal. We should celebrate successes, small and large. And John touched on that. We should also remember that chance favors those who are prepared. There is no limit to what can be accomplished if you don't care who gets the credit. Communicate, communicate, communicate through a variety of things we had access to. And then when operating funds get low, raise more money, don't cut back. This resulted in us starting a very helpful corporate donor program. This was the first year of the corporate sponsor program. This group right here contributed $20,500, so they proved to be a very good source of funding. So now we began looking at how do we make this happen. There's blockage at US 20. This was the discussion if we didn't do a tunnel. We said that's unworkable. We were advised that Indiana Department of Transportation is very protective of their US highways, and good luck trying to cut down from the surface for a tunnel. Well, that issue went away, and we got the money to do a tunnel with the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. Did not need any matching funds. The next thing was we had a serious gap in Phase 6. And that gap stretched for a quarter of a mile. Those of you who know the area, here's Sunrise Lane. It stretches for 1,320 feet down to this area right here. In this area, the corridor was 66 feet wide. Half of that width of the corridor belonged to these landowners here, and the other half, the west half, belonged to a family named the Hain family. We first discussed with them their interest in selling it. They said they were. They seemed open, but not yet. Ike Hain attended our annual Pumpkinvine meeting in 2004, and then things happen when you're doing this kind of thing. Exactly 1 week after the annual meeting, Ike was killed in a car accident. That put discussions on hold. They restarted. Bob Carrico and I went out to see them and make them an offer, and we executed a deal with them to buy that 1,320 feet, totally opening up that phase of the corridor. That was a relief. Phase 2 is a similar thing to Hain, except Coachman owned land that we needed along Railroad Street. They donated their property. That was wonderful. Middlebury received a grant for $150,000, and we were off and running. They completed Phase 2 with installing from Wayne Street across the railroad bridge to York Drive. Then we had a businessman who wanted an easement across the corridor. He owned property here. He manufactured trailers. He had land here. He needed storage for his trailers, and he needed some way to get across. He came to us and wanted to know if he could buy a permanent easement from us. We were glad to do that. He was suggesting somewhere around $25,000. One of the board members suggested $75,000, may be more appropriate. He hauled out his checkbook, and we had a check for $75,000. And you can see this. This is a satellite view today. You can see he's using it heavily. When you amortize it, that was done in 2000. This is now 2025. So the cost per year of his investment, it really is pretty low, and it's getting lower. Phase 3, we have an easement or an encroachment issue. Here, a landowner is using the corridor for his garden, which was precious to him, but taking our corridor, blocking our corridor. He was also concerned about how close the corridor was to his meeting house right here. So we talked with him, and he suggested that he could buy a piece of land here, half of the corridor width, if we would trade for this half here. We gladly did that. So right now, that trail comes up here. We moved to the north. That gave us room for a trailhead and a restroom. We go around his property, giving him a lot more room from his meeting house, and then back on the Pumpkinvine corridor. We had a more serious one develop here, or that was developed. Here, the landowner thought that he was going to own the corridor. Therefore, he built the corner of one of his buildings. This is a machine shop, I believe, on the corridor. He pastured this with his horses. He built his driveway on the corridor, and the corridor goes on part of his barnyard pad. So this was harder to resolve, but we were able to trade him some land and now simply go around it. And I think Norm may be talking more about that in a bit. That's what it looks like today. This is greened up again. I think they were just killing the grass, so it looks quite nice today. And then lastly, we had an individual who purchased a blind lot right here. And I think it was the county that said you can't have a blind lot where you build a house unless you have an easement to get out to the road. Well, he did have an easement, but he built his driveway on our corridor. So to resolve that, we had 73 feet going past his property. We gave him an easement on which he built a driveway. That's what it looks like today. It's really quite nice. Now, activity south of US 20 tunnel. We're beginning to run overtime. I want to run through some things very quickly. Here was one that no one anticipated. We stayed off this particular piece of property until the court had quieted title and said that we own it. And then when we went out, we discovered that someone had been there harvesting cherry trees. They took down 36 trees, 4,000 to 5,000 board feet estimated. Now what to do? It's hard to wander up and down the road asking your neighbors if they've taken your cherry trees. So we contacted the local DNR agent. He climbed into a helicopter with the state police. They did an overfly, spotted the logs, and advised the homeowner to cease and desist. They didn't belong to him. They belonged to the Pumpkinvine. Now we said, what do we do with them? So we solicited bids for the logs, and the best bid in a number of ways came from the Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Seminary. They were building a new library. Some of you probably are familiar with that. They wanted cherry lumber to finish off the library. As it turns out, Don Steiter, their director of maintenance, had a sawmill at his farmette. AMBS purchased the logs. Don had them moved, set everything up, cut those logs up, and converted the logs into lumber. And you can now see them in the library at AMBS. There's the inside, there's the admissions office. And there's a nice plaque for Don for what he did. Unfortunately, about 4 years after this, Don suffered a fatal accident at his home. So it still is wise, I think, to say what a great job he did in helping this happen. I'm almost done here. Here were 5 landowners who basically said, after they acknowledged that we owned the corridor, and you can see the corridor running here, you can see it from the air, you cannot see it from the ground, that if we built the corridor here, we would be messing with their ability to farm, and we agreed with that. So we ultimately worked to go around their farms, and that's how it looks. If you've been out there, you know that that's where the trail goes. One of the landowners said, I want to move a ditch. And we said, we're not moving any ditches. He said, I'll move it for you. I've got the equipment. And by George, he got whatever permits he needed and his equipment out and cut down trees and moved the ditch and did a bang-up job. Here's what it looks like in the air. These are the landowners. There's County Road 127 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 landowners. The tricky thing here is you had to get them all moving at the same time, because if one said, I won't do it, then you were blocked again, just in a different way. So they all had to be signing their documents at about the same time. So it worked. I have one last obstacle, and this is not really an obstacle, this is an incident. You've heard the talk on, especially from CJ and John, about the opposition and sometimes the intimidation. Well, that's why I brought my object lesson. This is out here, this is County Road 127. The trail is developed, obviously, but I took this picture because this is what the trail looked like before it was cleared and the asphalt laid. It was just a big mass of trees and brush and stuff. I talked my wife into going out there to walk it before it was cleared. And I said, they have had trouble with neighbors, with people coming out. I think it's been a while, but they have had troubles. So I need to buy us some walking sticks. So we thought a shovel handle might do the trick. They certainly work well as a walking stick, and they're pretty sturdy if any other need came up. Well, here we were on that segment, and we made a walk about out to here, and all of a sudden here came a van out, did a roaring, spinning rear tire turnaround and pulled up across from where we were. The driver rolled his window down and said, "I'll be back," and spun out and left. Well, we don't know whether the presence of these tools helped convince him not to go any further, but we turned around and hustled back, and that's the end of the incident, and I'm glad it ended that way. Just very quickly, when I came on board in this interim period right here, the only thing done was about 10%, and that was the demonstration issue from Abshire Park out to County Road 28. This got done by Middlebury in 2005, and then we had a plethora of stuff going on. We had our act together, we had things going well, and we got everything done except the three sections, this was Shipshewana, and these two are the area between County Road 33, 20, and 35, and now those are done. So it's been it was a good session. Should we have attempted any more? I had started this out by saying on my slide, do I have any regrets? And if I could do it over again, I'd try to stimulate more discussion on should we go 12 feet instead of 10? And I think we could have had more discussion and maybe done something with more tunnels. County Road 37, County Road 22, I think might be safer with tunnels under them, but we did not go that way. So thank you for your time, I appreciate it, and thank you for the support of the Pumpkinvine Nature Trail. That's forward, and that's the.
My picture's been on, you know who I am, and so I'll move ahead here. I was a board member from 89 to 97, first board secretary, left the Friends Board in 97. I was told by the attorney for the town of Shipshewana that I could have the job if I resigned from the Pumpkinvine Board. So I resigned from the board to take the job and became the town manager there, knowing what I faced. If I had to resign from the Pumpkinvine Board, how would they ever get the trail to Shipshewana? So I had a job to persuade the town council to get involved. One of the key people there that helped me do this was Paul Mishler, who is now 100 years old, but has ridden the trail even last year all the way to Middlebury on his own bike. But we needed a master plan that included the trail, or else there would be no application for money. So Paul Mishler was on the park board as well as Paul Wolf, and Paul Mishler said, well, I know there's resistance to the trail, but let's just put it in the master plan and we'll tell the town council that it's only for the trail in town, not outside of it. So we got it in the master plan. So then the next job was to convince the town council that the trail would be a good thing, not something that's bad or harmful to the town. I always met with Roger Yoder every Monday morning to talk about business for the council meetings. And when I arrived at Shipshewana, I said, I can't be accountable to 5 people. I need to be accountable to 1 person. And I said, if you have issues, you talk to Roger Yoder, who is president, chair of the town council. So that worked out pretty well. Began to talk to Roger about the benefits of what it would mean for the town to have the trail. He suggested first that we catch up here. He suggested that I first try to the county to see whether the county would take over the trail. Well, there was no acceptance there at all. So I began to talk to Roger about the town taking it over. He agreed. We went to the vice chair, Judy Yoder. She came around, and then we had a private meeting with the whole board, and eventually they supported that they would be willing to accept the trail all the way to the county line. Then we had to convince our attorney, who was the attorney for the town and also for the county, and one of the county commissioners was a big friend of the Warners, and they were very opposed to the trail. So our attorney had a decision to make. Was he going to work for the town or was he going to work for the county? So Judy Yoder, Roger, and I went in to see the attorney, and Judy said to Kurt, well, Kurt, you have to make up your mind. Are you going to work for the city, town, or are you going to work for the county? And Kurt said, I'll work for the town. So from there on, we had support to go ahead. This is Roger, who has now passed away, unfortunately. He acquired Parkinson's disease, but after I left, he was on the Pumpkinvine board, so he was really a wonderful guy and a very supportive guy. Eventually, we submitted the grant. Jim Smith came and worked really closely with me, and otherwise my name was on it. We had, as Jim pointed out, we had a blockage at 1150, and they had built on the trail, and we had a lawsuit to try to get access to the trail. Then we had a countersuit by both of the people that were blocking the trail, and so at a certain point, I went to my bishop friend, Leonard Miller, and said, I've got a grant I can't submit a grant application unless we can get through this blockage. And I said, Irwin won't give in. So Leonard said, well, let me talk to his bishop. So he talked to his bishop, and the bishop called me and said, I understand you have a lawsuit against one of my church members. I said, no, he's countersuing me. He said, he's countersuing you? I said, yes. This was on a Friday. On a Monday morning, Erwin called me and said, how do I get out of the lawsuit? I couldn't take communion last Sunday. I said, all you have to do is just drop the lawsuit and we'll take care of it, and we'll go around. So this is how we resolved it. And the driveway, as Jim talked about, was a problem. We resolved that. I had talked to his bishop too, and he said, just lay low, we'll get him around. So we submitted the grant in 2005. Jim was really helpful. I had too much other on my plate, but that worked. Grant approved in 2005. I worked with Larry Neff, County Parks Superintendent, to select engineering firm all the way from Middlebury to Shipshewana, and it was the group that way we were connected and coordinated rather than having separate engineering. So, and then we had the ribbon cutting. I resigned. I retired in 2005, but I still had two major projects with my name on it: the Pumpkinvine and also the Hostetler Hudson Museum. And so the town hired me to stay on, not as town manager, but as director of special projects. So I stayed on until these projects were completed. And then they gave us an award, quality of life. So they went from being totally opposed to saying, you guys did a wonderful thing. And this is a proposed route from 850 in. We were stopped at 850. And then John took me back in 2015 to talk to the town manager there to see whether we could help them get this through. And they said yes. So I was busy another 5 years. And this is the route that we eventually proposed, but the purple was blocked. We were blocked with red and purple. The others the people own. We'll get to that in a minute. But the purple route, that was the Pletcher property. And so I had people helping me with this. One of the more best help was Willie Christner, who was Amish, and he wanted the trail pretty badly. So we couldn't persuade the Pletchers to let us through. So Willie said, well, I'll buy it. So he paid the Pletchers $1 million and then donated the trail section back to us. So it was an amazing gift. Then we had two landowners here, both Amish. Small section. We spent 2 years trying to sit in their house and talk to them, persuade them. It didn't work. And 19, the friends provided $50,000 available to buy those two parcels. The landowners continued to refuse, and the town council had to threaten to use the eminent domain to secure the land. Actually, they didn't threaten, they actually filed it. The next day they came back and said, we'll accept. So they knew they'd get a lot less money if they didn't. So that's how we got through there. Final acquisition. So those were the people that owned the land. Elvin Miller had bought that section right off of 850, and he was a friend. He owned the mercantile, and he's the father-in-law to Levi King and the father of Joanna King Miller, who you know as our rep. And she was also very helpful in helping me get through a lot of places. Her nephew, Zach Stalsus, was on the town council, so I got him to help do through the opposition. And this is the ribbon cutting. And so representatives there, Joanna's on the right there, and other town council members are there. So that's the trail that eventually came, and this is what it looks like now. And what made the trail possible: perseverance, generous community, public-private partnerships, and something special we have. And now it's your turn to, if you have questions or comments you want to make, raise your hand, and they'll pass a mic around to you if you want to ask questions. Of any of the three, we'll get that. Any questions or comments?
I keep thinking about all those people that said no. I wonder what it would be like to interview them now.
Well, I know that some of them have apologized.
Have they?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a real Amish corridor going through there now.
I'd just like to make another comment about the count that Bob did. Some of you may have thought, well, what does that mean? I think count was helpful in getting a lot of the grants in terms of how many people were using the trail. So that was information that was important to put into grant applications.
I'm just wondering, is there a relationship today with the Elkhart Community Foundation? They certainly have grants and they have a commitment to trails.
Yep. Yes, Brittany Short, who was the chair after John, was hired by the Elkhart County Foundation, and now they have 2 or 3 people solely dedicated to developing more trails. And they're committed to also do maintenance, so we're very fortunate. One of the sticking points for me, though, however, is that it kind of cuts off the connection to Shipshewana and LaGrange County. And so I had Brittany talk to the director of the people there, and so we're trying to get a board member from Shipshewana on the other Pumpkinvine board, but so I think that'll work out, but we're certainly glad and happy for the money that lays in the background for rebuilding and maintenance. Thanks.
Anyone else?
My name is Wayne Denlinger. Nick and I ride that trail probably 5 days a week, every week over the spring, summer, and fall. And we've ridden trails all over the United States and many other places. This remains our favorite. The one thing that sticks out as all of you guys were speaking this morning is your perseverance. 35 years of work. And for those of us who use it, thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're sorry we went over time. Thank you for coming, and some people are going to ride in spite of the 40-mile-an-hour wind. I'm not, but
And the possibility of rain.
and thanks to LLI people for allowing this to happen and paying for this.
Glad
Thanks.
to. Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for coming out. Yeah, and let's give them a hand for all the